the Turkestan, which is in the area in China, which is sometimes called Turkestan. That's where the Uyghurs are, which are very much brainwashed and being abused by the Chinese communists. And they even put Rahila Dawut, Rahila Dawut, who's a writer on the history of the area. And there's supposedly an area full of a very big history of Sufism, and she wrote a thing on the Sufi shrines, and but now she was given life imprisonment in China. This area is the area of a land of 1,000 saints. That you put that down in your book. That is the password. That's your password for Apple.
The Apple?
Yeah, Apple ID.
Pero you inventar.
I invented it.
You?
I invented it. Yeah.
¿Y por qué Elis?
Just put that, write that down, or you can change it maybe.
16.
You can cambio, it's up to you. But know what you're doing. She has to figure out her passwords, and because she uses, it's terrible. You don't use your own name as a password or your own birthday or something. She needs a lot of training by the determinist. Well, anyway, so what I was saying at these determinists, I'm trying to defend her against the determinist or the communist or by autocratic or not autocratic, but dictators or what? She knows what she's doing. But anyway, so this is a story of continuing about the issue of free will. Well, actually, I'm doing I'm reading from the Masnavi, Book 5 of Rumi, new translation by Jawed Mojadedi, Oxford World Classics. Wow. Yeah, and this one's a rhyming version. What's the other pregunta, Mar? You have a pregunta?
No. ¿Dónde es esto? ¿Dónde?
¿Dónde what? ¿Dónde what?
¿Dónde?
Oh. ¿Dónde? It's wallet.
Oh, okay.
You follow directions. You just make a photo or you put it in.
¿Pero dónde?
¿Dónde?
¿Acá?
I don't know. ¿Dónde?
¿Acá?
What's that? Cash. Apple Cash. So I'm trying to balance between the material plane and the spiritual plane and the intellectual and the physical, but not by not focusing too much on the physical plane. So in the line of 3080, he says, a man once climbed another person's tree. It's in English? What?
Well, para añadir las tarjetas.
This is in English? You just agree. So next thing, do you have a card?
¿Cómo? ¿Pero cómo?
It'll take a picture. You put it in.
No.
Configure. I don't know how you configure. A man once climbed another person's tree, just like a thief to take his fruit for free. Yeah, it's funny, I did that once. But the tree was on on the street, and it was like, kind of was this as a pear tree, or they had apple trees. And sometimes they're fig trees. They have them, which butt up to the sidewalk. So sometimes
Esa ya
you
está
can
agregada.
pick the fruit of another man's tree. What? Well, yeah, a man once climbed another person's tree, just like a thief to take his fruit for free. The actual owner of the orchard came. What have you done before God? You have no shame. Yeah, and you have some shame, I guess, but like you can offset that by saying that they maybe let the fruit go to waste, or you could say that it was say that the squirrels are gonna eat it, or the birds.
No, no puedo, no soy
If somebody
capaz.
didn't act fast.
No soy capaz.
So I'm gonna have to
Ayúdame,
take
amor.
action and stop for the second. But here in God's orchard, I'm a slave. Well, here in God's own orchard is God's slave, eating the dates on its tree which God gave. Well, I could argue that these figs were given by God, and why does these people say they own? I own the fig, or I own the apple. And some of these trees are like within the public space of the sidewalk, even. Yeah. Well, I don't go overboard and pick all their stuff out either. So I try to be fair and only have a little shame. Oh, eating the dates on its tree which God gave, so why blame him for this so stupidly? Yeah, and why do you have to blame me and accuse me of being stupid, and why blame me? So I'm the one who appreciates these things and trees and natures, and I've planted trees. I planted a mulberry tree. I put in some grapevines, and I planted trees. Oh, yeah. Okay, so why blame him for this so stupidly? Yeah, and I even go out and I go berry picking, and I'm fairly kind to the trees. It's the rich Lord's bread. Don't be miserly. The owner called the servant, go and fetch. Yeah, well, sometimes the owners get to be miserly, and they'll tell you to get out. Yeah, so that happened with the huge mulberry tree. There's one that's really prolific. It's just gigantic with so many berries. It was on 47th Street and by the tennis court, and the owners used to get. When you pick the mulberries, she accused that you were, I guess, causing the berries to fall on the sidewalk, and then they have to clean up the sidewalk, and so it's very miserly. It's the rich Lord's bread, don't be miserly. The owner called the servant, go and fetch a rope so I can answer this vile wretch. He tied him to a tree, then beat his back and legs with the big stick in his attack. Have shame before God, then the thief exclaimed. You are killing someone who should not be blamed. Yeah, and they were like beating me up, and they were killing someone who should not be blamed. God's slave with God's stick. Then the owner said, is beating hard another slave instead. It is God's stick in his back and his limb. I'm just a slave, an instrument for him. He answered, I'll ditch fatalism now. Free will is from now what I avow. So we're back to this thing about free will. So his free will makes all other wills free too. He is the writer who raised dust we view. His free will is what makes ours, and his order is backed up by our free choice, its supporter. Every created thing is capable of ruling other forms that have no will. Dragging the ladder like caught prey back here, or dragging someone far off by his ear. God's craft to work needs no instruments to use, and turns someone's free will to his noose. His free will traps men without will everywhere. God hunts such men without dog or a snare. The carpenter has power to over wood, the artist over portraits as he should. The ironmonger's iron knows he rules, the builder's ruler over all his tools. Yeah, and a lot of these builders and these, like, a lot of the farmers and the people around there, they rule. They have so many tools. You got to have a lot of tools, and I even am that way. Like, I try to hide my tools. Like, a lot of times you have different tools, and like if you had a good screwdriver, let's say, then the kids would, or somebody else would borrow it and take it, and it would be lost forever. What? So I was even proposing to buy, that we should get a toolbox, even though a small one, because it's an apartment in New York, but should be organized a little. The builder's ruler over all his tools, but this case is in fact much rarer still. But in fact, it's kind of rare to have a toolbox in an apartment in New York, probably. But many wills, like slave before his will. Does your power over inert things deprive them of inertness, and do they survive? Yeah, I don't know what the impact of my power over inert things like these tools, what sort of difference it makes on a spiritual path. Does your power over inert things deprive them of inertness, or do they survive? What had happened tomorrow?
48,
Don't just scribble passwords on envelopes. And this is.
15,
Where's your notebook?
17, 55.
Yeah. Don't know. Does your power over another thing? I need some power in this podcast. Thus, his power over our will similarly does not deprive us of a will that's free. Yeah, so in a way, my influence in this podcast does not deprive you of free will. Declare that his will is complete, yet you can't blame him for the wrong things that you do. Well, his will is complete, but you can't blame him for your bad actions. So you said, it's his wish. I'm an unbeliever. Well, notice how your will's not absent either. It's not your unbelief without volition. Unwilling unbelief's a contradiction. Commanding someone who can't is a bore. Anger at this is worse than the kind Lord. They beat the ox if it wouldn't take the yoke, but not because it can't fly. What a joke. The ox is not excused for bad behavior. Why should we then excuse the ox's trainer? We aren't injured. Don't now wrap your head in bandage. You have free will. Feel shame instead. Strive to get freshness from God's cup. You will become then selfless and without a will. Then all volition is that wines completely. Like drunks, you have been forgiven absolutely. If you beat something, wine is beating it. If you sweep something, wine is sweeping it. The drunkard's drunk from God's own cup. And so he must be just and sound, as you should know. The sorcerers told Pharaoh, stop, retreat. A drunk has no concern for hands and feet. That one swine is our hands and feet today. The outward hands is worthless shadow play. So, whatever God wills is going to happen today, so it's not up to me. I can't do anything about the rain, and there's nobody playing indoors on the tennis court, and I haven't been able to straighten out the problem in China with the Uyghurs and the Turkestan and what they've been doing to Tibet. So whatever God wills happens. Oh, okay. That is to say, well, I'm not going to get too upset about the whole thing, and so what I'm going to do is keep reading. Also because it's raining, you're reading, because of God's will, yeah. Whatever God wills happens. Thus, the message is not be lazy here within this passage. Yeah, I could just be lazy and sit in the house and it seems like my New York Times paper didn't come, and I could have become lazy and just sat and read the paper, and I could get as lazy as could be, but instead I'm doing this podcast, which in a lazy way, I suppose. Be lazy here within this passage. It urges to be serious and sincere. Yeah, in the same time, I need to get more serious and sincere in this podcast. It urges to be serious and sincere. Prepare to be of service over here. If someone says whatever you wish to, then you can do what you desire to do. Yeah, well, I guess I may have free will and still can do what I desire to do within the constraints of my wife getting her phone set up and and the rain outside and the limitations of my friends and the weather and well, you can still do what you desire to do. You are permitted to be lax and slacken. Yeah, sometimes, when you get too intense over your meditation practice and your exercise and all your programs and activities, if you have too much going on, you are permitted to be lax and slacken. So I guess sometimes it's good to sit home with your wife in the rain, and you are permitted to be lax and slacken because whatever you desire will happen. Yeah, whatever. Since I did meditation this morning, whatever I desire is going to happen. Wow, that's cool. But when you are told God wills comes to be, your fate is his decree eternally. Yeah, well, I guess his will is my fate eternally, but he's better get his act together. Yeah, I still can complain and say that I'm not waiting till I turn 70 to become a santo. Oh, yeah, well, how can you decide that stuff? Your fate is his decree eternally. Why don't you hover near him like a servant? Well, I could hover around and just become a satsangi hoverer and just hang out. Go to Chicago and just hang out near the center and go there all the time and go at 4 a.m. in the morning and do meditation. Wow. So you're not going to hover around looking for a glance, but you're going to go to meditate instead, or you're going to do both, or why don't you hover near him like a servant, to pray with zeal and fully be observant? Well, that's a good question. That's a good point in this podcast. Why don't you hover near him? Him is the H-I-M. Like a servant, to pray with zeal and fully be observant? Well, I try to meditate accurately, and even despite the fact that it's not accurate, I try to make it accurate. And sometimes I have to say the 5 charge words like 5 times instead of once. And oh my God, because I have to get my mind, which is not following my free will. It's not following it correctly, so I have to practice more. To pray with zeal and fully be observant. If you are told what the vizier seeks out and all his wishes must be carried out, would you rush faster than all other men, so he could show his kindness to you then, or flee from the vizier and his home too? The latter won't draw his help now to you. This saying's turned you lazy. Your perception and thoughts are upside down with that selection. Yeah, so a lot of times my perception and thoughts get turned upside down after I've been shopping too much. I've been to the mall, or I've watched TV, or I've watched a movie, or sat on my butt and didn't play tennis. Then I have to go back into meditation and try to hover near the internal spiritual master and pray with zeal. Yeah, this saying's turned you lazy, your perception and thoughts are upside down with that selection. What if they say, this sire decrees? What's this? It means don't sit with others, but be his. Yeah, don't just sit there like a lump on the couch and with your wife setting up her iPhone. Don't sit with others, but be his. Stick near this Lord, for his is the decree. Yeah, so that's why I get up and meditate early in the morning at, say, 5 o'clock, and I sit there like a lump on the couch the same way, so... Because it's been decreed. It's been God's will that I do meditation. He saves the friend's life. He slays the enemy. Yeah, I don't know when he's going to slay my enemies, but I'm looking forward to that. He slays the friend's life, slays the enemy. What he should wish for, you will see today. Choose service to him and don't go astray. It doesn't mean since he rules, don't go near, in case you are put to shame, which you should bear. The true interpretation's what makes you ardent, hopeful, fast, and respectful too. Yeah, so if I'm able to truly interpretate this poetry in this podcast, that will make me ardent, hopeful, fast, and respectful too. And if it makes you lax, that situation is altering and not interpretation. It's meant to make men ardent everywhere. So I guess I'll just become more ardent. To hold in 2 arms those who feel despair. Ask the Quran its meaning, or that man who set fire to desire for the Quran to be a sacrifice and thus accept it. To take the role of essence of his spirit, one either smells the roses with one's nose, or that oil that's absorbed the scent of rose. Yeah, so you just got to get out there and smell some of the roses. So I did get I got the flowers from the farmer's market, and they're here, and so that's what I'm doing. I'm smelling the roses. The tennis court has not dried, so it's God's will that I continue this podcast. Oh, okay. The ink has dried, has this intention too, to trigger the important work from you. Yeah, so it's triggering the importance of this podcast, the important work in this podcast. To trigger the important work from you, the pen wrote that all actions will elicit effects and consequences too, which fit it. The ink has dried. Live wrongly and you'll suffer. If you bring goodness, though, you're bound to prosper. Well, am I bound to prosper from bringing the goodness of this podcast? Well, bring cruelty and lose luck. The ink has dried. Bring justice, then eat fruit. The ink has dried. When thieves steal, hands are lost. The ink has dried. When they drink wine, they're drunk. The ink is dried. Do you think God would come now, possibly, like one dismissed from prior authority, to say, this matter's not in my purview? Don't come to me to moan like you used to. Yeah, don't come around me moaning and stuff. And, yeah. Rather, it means the ink has dried, so justice is not the same in my view as injustice. Oh, okay. Yeah. I've made distinct what's good and what is evil, as well as bad and worse for all you people. If you were more disciplined than other men, yeah, if I could get more disciplined than other men. If you are more disciplined than other men, God's grace will know and make it count more than that bit you excel by. You will see the mott become a mountain generously. Yeah, that'd be nice if I became a mountain. If I could make my meditation into a gigantic mountain, or meditate in the mountains, or, yeah, how are you going to do that? If a king makes no serious distinction between the good and the seekers of oppression, the one who trembles fearing his rejection, and he who eyes his fortune for dissension, considering them the same without a difference, then he is not a real king in this instance. Yeah. If you increase your efforts just one bit, God's weighing scales will carefully measure it. Oh. All right, so wait a minute here. If I increase my efforts just a little bit, so I'm going to take this to heart here. If I increase my efforts, if you increase your efforts just one bit, God's weighing scales will carefully measure it. So I have increased, and I'm trying to improve my meditation, and just one bit. So God's going to have to carefully measure it. Before the other kings, you work all night, but they can't tell what's falseness and what's light. Yeah, well, I could work all night, and God's the only one who's able to carefully measure my contribution in this podcast. Before the other kings, you work all night, but you can't tell what's falseness and what's light. And if a slanderer should speak ill of you, that nullifies your years of service too. Yeah, well, I was slandered, and so they did speak ill of me, and I have to see what to do about my defamation case. And if a slanderer should speak ill of you, that nullifies your years of service too. But to the hearing and the seeing king, the slanderer's words will not mean anything. He makes the slanderers feel despair, and if they approach us with advice, they wish to speak ill of the king in front of us. The ink has dried. Yeah. So pretty much what has happened is ink has already dried on the memorandum of decision, and they slandered me, and the ink has dried at this point in the slanderer's case. So the slanderer's words will not mean anything. He makes the slanderers feel despair. And then the slanderers later on, they fall into despair and they get depressed, and in some cases they get post-traumatic stress syndrome and all that stuff. He makes the slanderers feel despair. If they approach us with advice they wish to say, to speak ill of the king in front of us, the ink has dried, don't show him faithfulness. How can the ink has dried mean how can the ink has dried mean actually that loyalty now equals treachery? Give treachery for treachery, it's dried. Give loyalty for loyalty, it's dried. There's pardon, but where's glorious hope? That you through piety might yet be made pure too. Yeah, there's still hope of me being made pure. A thief whose pardon saves his life, but how can he become a treasury minister now? Yeah, the funny thing is I don't know if I'll ever become the treasury minister once I've been slandered, so it's probably hard for me to start a hedge fund at this point, because it's just a thief whose pardon saves his life. I may have saved my life, but at this point it's not really starting a hedge fund, so why not? But how can he become a treasury minister now? Come, righteous one, each crown and banner must have first developed out of actual trust. So if the Sultan's son betrays instead, the Sultan will arrange to chop his head. But if an Indian slave shows loyalty, long may he live, says the authority. What of a slave, a loyal dog at the door, will make its owner happier than before? He'll kiss its mouth in much victorious grace. He'd give if he'd a lion in its place. Even a thief should one day do service, his truthfulness uprooting then his falseness, like Fayaz, interesting Fayaz, because Fozayl, I just learned about him. He's in the memorial of the saints in a writing of Attar. And Attar, of course, Rumi was familiar with Attar's writing, like the Conference of the Birds, and here's referring to an early mystic, Fozayl, Fozayl, like Fozayl, who's a really interesting character. Like Fozayl, once one of the highwaymen, repenting though much faster than 10 men. Yeah, so that's what I've done, is I'm repenting faster. I repent a lot faster than 10 men. Oh, is that why you're podcasting your repentance? Repenting, though, much faster than 10 men, the sorcerers showed Pharaoh in that instance similarly their faithfulness and patience. They lost their hands and feet, high price they paid. Those worshipping for years would not have strayed. The course you have served for half a century, so when will you acquire sincerity? Yeah, the issue here is, when will I acquire sincerity? And I've practiced meditation for 47 years, which comes to about a half a century. So when will I acquire sincerity in this podcast? Senator Mendez had all these gold bars, and his wife had a fancy car, and so that's when I started thinking about maybe his wife was the problem. Oh, yeah. Well, here I'm continuing in 3165, Book 5, and he says, once in Herat, a man who was outspoken noticed a nobleman's slave in the open, riding with the satin clothes and gold belts too. He turned towards the sky and prayed, "Oh, you, God, why don't you learn from their master too? How to maintain slaves better than you do? God, learn how to maintain them properly from this chief who's a royal appointee. He lacked food, destitute, and naked too, trembling due to the winter's cold. He who was brazen as he'd lost his consciousness and had grown rude due to his laziness. Relying on God's numerous gifts, he thought, the mystic is God's close friend, is he not?" Yeah, you would think, if I'm a close friend of God, and you would think that I would be useful or something. Yeah. The mystic is God's close friend, is he not? Yeah, then I should cozy up to myself or something. The king's friends can show boldness of this sort, but don't you show it when you lack support. Yeah, and I don't have the kind of support. God gives waste better than such belts. Instead of giving crowns, God gives your actual head. Oh no. So my head is gonna be sacrificed. The king once blamed those slaves, Lord, and had bound his hands and feet, and then brought his slaves around and tortured them before he said, "Show me your master's hidden gold immediately." Yeah, so, if you have this hidden gold or something, sometimes you get too wealthy. They come around, like the FTC comes around, and they sue Amazon because they have too much gold. What happened? Yeah, well, tell me his secret, base ones, all of you, or I'll cut off your tongues and your throats too. He tortured them for 1 whole month, all night and day, the rack, pain, torment, what a plight. He started cutting them, but not one slave would tell his secret. He's the one they'll save. The dervish heard a voice in his dream say, "First learn to be a slave, then come this way." To be a slave. I don't want to become a slave, but I'm a slave to the system, I guess. Yeah, you said you were a slave to the parking meter and stuff, yeah. Yeah, I'm a slave to a lot of different things, and in a way I'm a slave to my cell phone, in a way. I'll first learn to be a slave, then come this way. You who have ripped Joseph's shirt should then know too. It's your own fault if that wolf now kills you. Wear all year round what you weave here yourself. Eat all year round what you sow here yourself. These constant sufferings are all your own reaping. Oh, yeah, I was saying all my suffering is just my own reaping, so... Yeah, so why do you complain if it's your karma, so... These constant sufferings are all your own weeping. The ink has dried, has this specific meaning. My principle won't shun the righteous ones. Good ones to good ones, bad ones to bad ones. Hard work because King Solomon is living. While you remain the devil, his sword's winning. When you become an angel, there's no fear of Solomon and his sword, as it's clear. He rules the devils, not the angels, and strife is not in the heavens, but on land. Yeah, the strife is not in the heavens, it's in the land. It's overland. Abandon fatalism, for it's empty, so you may know the mystery of the mystery. Quit fatalism of a lazy mind to learn about a very dearer kind. Yeah, if I keep my mind from being lazy and keep it busy with doing Simran and abandon being loved, be of the lovers. Yeah.